So today I'm going to talk about how you make your own LiFePO4 power bank. Now it's actually quite a simple thing to do really, because all you need is 8 or 16 of these LiFePO4 batteries and a decent BMS, battery management system, to keep all your batteries equalised and control your charging currents and discharging currents and protect your batteries. And you need a box to stick them all in. And funny enough, the hardest bit is the box that they all go in. Now you can buy commercial boxes, they're extortionately expensive and they're not very good anyway. Now I've got a fair bit of experience of building battery boxes for these LiFePO4 cells. Unfortunately, not good experience. I think everyone I've built so far has all been wanting to a version 2. So hopefully today I'm going to be describing my version 3 or version 4 battery box based on all my experiences of building these battery boxes. So let's start by listing the things that we want in this battery box. The first thing we want is a way of compressing the batteries. In other words, we get all of these cells, line them up side by side, and we compress them such that they can't expand. So why do we actually do this? Well, the jury's out, but battery manufacturers recommend it, and the reason why they recommend compressing all these batteries together is that during charging and discharging, minute bubbles of oxygen are made, and without boring the pants off everyone talking about the chemistry of oxygen, if you keep oxygen as what they call nanobubbles, which is minute clusters of molecules that's only 100 nanometers maximum in diameter, these oxygen molecules, they will come out and they will go back extremely easily, so that the oxygen bubbles will actually be used within the battery. Now if you let the oxygen bubbles get bigger and combine through various forces that exist when you put molecules together, and as you let molecules combine they develop a whole new set of forces that bind them together, they become extremely difficult, particularly oxygen, to break these bonds. And oxygen tends to have an affinity, as you know, to stick to other things, and what you want to do is you want the oxygen to come out and go back, come out and go back, and the only way you can achieve that is to not let the oxygen molecules and these bubbles get too big, and the way you do that is you keep the cells compressed. I mean, this is a cell I've just taken out for the purposes of this video, and although it's just come out of a battery box, you can actually see that there's no expansion on this whatsoever. These sides are in fact very, very slightly hollow, and this side is actually beautifully and flat. So it does actually work. It does keep, if you compress the cells, it does keep the cells lovely and fat and flat. So if our number one criteria is we want to be able to compress the cells, Well, that always has a contra problem, is that if you compress cells and restrict them, then once you've got them in your box at a very, very precision tight fit, they will always expand a fraction of a millimetre, and then of course they become a permanent feature of your box. So number 2 is you've got to not only have the ability to compress the cells, but you've got to have the ability to somehow decompress the cells so you can get them out. So what's the third thing we need to be able to do? Well, we need to be able to very easily be able to get to all of the cells and all the connections to the BMS, so that if we've got any problems we can always fault diagnose at a later date. So number 3, I'm going to put must be able to get to all the connections. So we can get in there with a meter and test equipment, maybe check the connections if we've got a fault or anything like that. But the next thing we need to be able to do, in my opinion, is I want to be able to mount it. In other words, I want to take this battery box and I want to be able to get it off the floor and screw it on the wall. I hate things on the floor, you know, stacked up in the corner of my meter cupboard or your plant room or wherever you're going to put your battery boxes. Yeah, they want to be off the floor, on the wall, so I can sweep the floor, sweep underneath it, and I don't want things to just use up floor space. So if it's got to be mountable on the wall, that implies a certain strength and a certain design, because I've got to be able to put bolts or something in it. Number 5 is a bit more obvious. I want to be able to, inside the same container, I want to be able to put all the batteries, and I want to be able to put the BMS in a container. Now, putting the BMS in a container, you've got to think about this from a design perspective, is that the BMS has got fins on it. So the last thing we want to do is put the BMS this way, because obviously if you put the fins just sticking out on both sides, you're not going to be able to dissipate heat, are you? So that means there are a couple of orientations the BMS can go. Like it can go horizontally, in which case the heat will radiate from the fins. It can go vertically, so the heat can rise through convection up the fins. But obviously the BMS can't go that way or that way, because it's not going to dissipate heat, is it? So in the design we've got to think about the orientation of the BMS. Now the next thing is we've got to, now I know some of you might be looking at this in America where the regulations are not quite so strict as they are obviously in Europe, but we've got to think about not only today's regulations but things like edition 19 for those of you who are into electrics. And we already know that edition 19 is going to start bringing in very ultra low voltage. By that I mean 24 volts, 48 volts, 96 volt systems. And one of the things that we're moving towards, people like myself, is to not have exposed conductors. By that, what I mean is you don't want to have a bolt sticking out with a great big sort of 25mm cable bolted on it, something like that, because you know, that bolt sticking out, although if you grabbed hold of it, it's only 48 volts, you're not getting an electric shock. But if something falls on it or something drops on it, we want to make sure that we don't get any sparks or short circuits. So we want to kind of think ahead, and we want to make sure all the connections are not exposed. Or if they are exposed, obviously they've got to be covered up or whatever. The next is all of these BMSs nowadays. They're all very, very similar, but they all have facilities for temperature sensors, and they have RS485 and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and all sorts of very useful interfaces. So we want to have some means of being able to connect it to Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and that implies the material that we make the box out of and the cover and things. So we can't obviously build a lovely stainless steel container and a box to put this all in, because we want to somehow be able to interact with the BMS. Now the BMS does have a little module. I mean, they come with a little plug-in module here, and then this is the Bluetooth. This is the Bluetooth interface they come with, and you can actually just sort of even in a metal container, you can kind of stick this on the outside with a little bit of double-sided tape if you want. But this is something to consider. And what else do we need? Well, it needs to be strong, particularly if we're going to mount it on the wall. It wants to last for the life of the batteries. So we want to design something that's going to be 10 to 15 years. So what I've done is I've put the design into SketchUp, and I'll make all the drawings for this available in the SketchUp repository for anybody who's interested. So let's talk through the basic design. So what I've got is I've got all the batteries on their side with all the terminals sticking out. It's all designed to go in a plywood box. I've chosen plywood as opposed to MDF just purely because this is going outside in my meter cupboard. I don't really want batteries in my workshop or in my garage or anything like that, so I've actually built a concrete plant room which just contains inverters and batteries and sort of heavy duty switch gear and things like that. So it might get slightly damp, so this is why I've built a marine ply and not MDF. So all the batteries are on the side with all the terminals exposed, and then the idea is that this structure here is a clamp, and it has a threaded shafts, 4 threaded shafts that run all the way through from one side to the other side, with nuts on the inside, so here, so in other words each shaft has got 3 nuts on it, if you like, so that this piece here, this vertical section here, can be screwed up tight and clamp all the batteries together. And then if ever I want to remove the batteries, obviously all I need to do is to remove or slacken off these nuts at these 4 nuts at this end, and that will create a little bit of slack, and obviously I can slide the batteries out. Then the whole thing fits inside this outer box, and the outer box has a small piece sticking up here with 3 big bolt holes in it, and then I can put some raw bolts here to actually bolt it on the wall. And of course the great thing is that I can bolt this on the wall myself, as you can probably imagine, because you can't really bolt a battery box on the wall that's already full of batteries. It's way too heavy. So what I can do is I can actually build this, and then I can take this inner frame out, take the batteries out, and then I can bolt it on the wall and make it secure. And then of course I can then put all the batteries in afterwards and then tighten it all up and clamp all the batteries together. And then the BMS sits on the top here in its own little compartment with plenty of room around it to allow for ventilation. And then I've allowed a provision for some terminals or connections here, so that the idea is the wires come down here through this big hole here, and they connect up internally here, so that there's no exposed bare terminals on the outside world. All the wire connections are actually made inside the box. And then the idea is that on the front of here I will just put a very simple piece of see-through clear plastic. So let's start by building the clamp. Now I need 4 pieces of 12mm ply that's 20.5 wide and 58.4 centimeters long. Now the other thing I've done in this design of this battery box is I've tried to make it so it fits nicely out of an 8x4 sheet. So in other words, I've used measurements like 58, things like that, so that you can get 4 of them out of an 8x4. Although of course that we are in Europe, and although we call them 8x4 sheets, they are in fact 250 by 125, which is just a tiny bit bigger. And now what I've got to do is I've got to run the wood through the saw to make it exactly 20.5 according to my drawings. Right, so before I make the wood exactly 20.5, I've just got to straighten up these edges so they're absolutely precision piece of wood to start with, because obviously I've sawn these by hand to get them roughly to the right size. Right, so now all I've got to do next is to set the saw to exactly 20.5 and make them the exact right width. That's it, bang on 20.5. Right, so the next bit I need these bits making into 58.4. Let's get the saw set to that mark. Oh, blimey. Yep, that's 58.4. And then what I'll do is I'll just set up the stop on the end of the saw. So that's stop now is set at 58.4. Right, that should be 4 bits. I must admit I do like this marine ply I bought. Although marine ply is bloody expensive now. I don't know what it's like in the rest of the world, but €60 a sheet maybe 2 years ago, and now same sheet's €100, so it's nearly doubled in price. So this is a threaded shaft that's going to run straight through the middle of this plywood to form the clamp. Now I've used 10mm threaded shaft, but 8mm would work just as well. The only reason I've used 10mm is because I can buy this 10mm at the plumbing merchants and the electrical wholesalers, because being an electrician I get trade prices, and 10mm is used for standoff structures when you're doing electrical work. So I can buy these at trade that's retail less 40%. Now if I buy 8mm I have to buy them from the nut and bolt suppliers, and of course I don't get trade prices, and that means the 10mm for me is cheaper than the 8mm. But if I was just going down the DIY shop and buying the shaft, I would use 8mm, not 10mm. So we have our 4 bits of 12mm that's going to form the clamp, and the idea being that what I'm going to do is machine 2 semicircles in here, glue them together, a bit like how you make a pencil, and then I'll put the shaft straight through the middle of it. And what will happen is we'll actually finish up with 2 bits glued together, and that will become a 24mm piece of plywood. And the way I'm going to machine 2 grooves, or 2 semicircles in here, is with the router. So what I'm going to do is I'll put in the 11mm wide, 5.5mm deep semicircular slots into all 4 bits of 12mm. Off to a good start. You don't see this on YouTube videos, do you? The bit where they glue it together and run out of glue, or the glue's gone solid or whatever. Oh, shit. Right, one. That's it's all glued together. So I think what I'll do now is I'll leave that overnight. Meanwhile, I'm going to nip into town and go and buy some more glue. So I've left it overnight, and we've got one lovely piece of plywood now, 24mm thick, with two lovely holes straight through the middle of it. And next job is just to sand it off nicely. Okay. Not sure how that got there. Now, for those of you who's familiar with some of these modelling CAD systems like SketchUp, you'll know that one of the great features of them is that clamp, and of course you can just dimension it very easily, or you can just have the back, or you can just turn on and off sections of the drawing, so you can just build each of these sub-assemblies in isolation. So I'm going to start building this by Right, that's looking good. That's how the batteries are going to go. And then this top panel, presumably goes this way. So this is the top. This is the bottom. So that's going to sit there. That's looking nice. That looks pretty good. Okay, right. Does it fit? There's alpha to alpha. So that means that bit goes there. That looks good. That bit goes there. That bit fits nice. That bit goes there. That bit goes there. Oh, there we go, and there's a 1mm gap. That goes there, that goes there. Right, so the next bit is the top and bottom. They've got to be 23 wide. So my next job is I've got to make this, what, 23, haven't we? So let's put a nice little mark on here at 23. Right, so let's start the first bit of gluing. So that bit goes there. Oops. That bit goes there. And that bit goes there. Good. Excellent. There we go. Right, so now I'm going to put the end panels on, and I can see this runs quite a few millimetres out true. So that will do. Glue's here. So the next job is I've got to mark exactly where the holes have got to be drilled in the box to put the threaded shaft through. So I've made this piece of threaded shaft, and I've just increased its diameter slightly with some tape, and very simply it has a nut on the end and then a very sharp point here, so I can use it a bit of as a scribing tool. Right, so this is going to go this way round. That's it, that's the bottom. So if I pop that in there, it's a nice oh dear, perhaps a bit of an over tight fit, probably never get it out now. And then I should be able to mark, put a little mark here. There we go. A little mark here. There we go. So that's going to sit there, that comes here. So I've got a tiny hole drilled through there, and if I've cocked it up, it's quite a nice size hole to fill. So let me just see how well this lines up. Right, so I've managed to get the threaded shaft through. I've put a nut and a washer on one end. I've got the nut and the washer for this end. There we go, another couple of threads left over. Whoops. So what I'll do now is saw off 4 shafts. Right, so just need to clean the ends up now. Okay, so that's the base all done. Hopefully if I slide that in there, it should go through there nicely. And it should come out the other side, which, whoops, yep, that one's nice and solid there. That one goes through there, oops. Whoops. Right, well that looks pretty good anyway. Right, so now I've got to put the top in place next. Drill these 4 holes for the top. Now one little trick is that if I just drill these holes through like this, then out the other side of this plywood it will just come through and it will just split all the wood the other side. So the secret is to get another piece of plywood, clamp the whole lot together in place, get a nice strong G-clamp, whatever, it's not a G-clamp is it, but you know what I mean. There we go, that's all nicely in place. So what I'll do now is if when I drill the hole, it will just drill into this other piece of plywood and won't shoot out and won't break out the back. Perhaps a bit deep. Right, let's have a look. Right, oh there we go, look. Bloody fantastic. And then hopefully that will go straight through there. Fabulous. Ho ho. Right, so next thing I've got to drill the holes at the other end. this end. So I've got to move this piece of wood to the other end. Right, well, I guess the moment of truth. Can I fit the batteries in it? And does it all work? Right, so this is the bottom. It goes in, it's going to go there. So this is the end plate. And this is the top. That goes there. Oh, that slides in beautifully there, doesn't it? This is definitely the way to drill the box, is to make the end panel first and use that as the you make this piece first and use that as the template, which is a much better way of doing it than the way I did the bottom ones, trying to make a guide. So what I should have done in retrospect is make this first and then just drilled it all through from there, I think. I have got to make a 48 volt box at some point, so this is all kind of like work in progress, learn on the job. Right, so I need the other two threaded shafts. They seem to go nicely in there. That fits beautifully in there. Wow, hey, this is looking really smart. Hopefully I've left enough space to get in this end here. Hopefully I've left enough space to get a washer and a nut. Looks smart though, but I've made this to precision a fit because although the batteries all fit now, of course if they bulge out a tiny bit, it's all very well being able to slacken off this piece, but it's whether or not I can slacken off this. I suppose will I be able to tap these out? No, not really, because when I screw this on the wall, there's going to be a wall here, and there's going to be another battery box about 6 centimetres away. So once these threaded shafts are in, then all I can do is slacken them off. I won't be able to sensibly remove them without unbolting this whole box off the wall. Okay, so clearly I'm going to have to make this a bit slacker. So I think the easiest way for me to do this, this is such a precision perfect fit, is instead of drilling these 10.5mm holes to take the 10mm shaft, I think I'll drill them through at probably about 11.5mm, and that will give me that extra little millimetre I need. Yeah, that's better. That's given my that's my 2mm there. So the next thing I need to do is to get rid of all of these screw holes. Right, so the next job is to mount the BMS. So when you're making these sort of things, it's a bit like if you've ever watched the old Orange County Choppers series, where Paul actually makes a complete bike, and then when he's finished it, he takes it all to bits, and then he gets it all chromed and sprayed and things. It's a bit like that with these sort of things, is that you have to actually build the complete thing, and then you have to take it all apart to paint it. Now the other thing I haven't done, which you may have noticed, and you're probably saying, Paul, you complete muppet, you haven't like filled this bit, you ain't filled this bit, you ain't sanded this bit, I mean, you know, what the hell. Well, the reason I haven't is because on these I've got all the bits of writing that says bottom, left, things, front, and this one says, this one's got top, left, front. Now if I fill and sand these and lose all that writing, I'm screwed. So I'm going to mount the BMS and things like that, and once I've got holes drilled in these things and bits and more things, you can't get it the wrong way around. It's a bit like this, you see. I mean, I've sanded this because I now know that it goes this way round just purely because I've got the washers glued into it. So let's have a look. This is the top, so I need the bottom. This is the bottom. That's got alpha. The other thing I do is I write alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta on all the corners, so I know that alpha goes to alpha, beta goes to beta, gamma goes to gamma. Of course, the nice thing is I actually live in Cyprus, so you know, sort of knowledge of the Greek alphabet is kind of compulsory. Right, so we've got the so this battery goes on the right with the negative terminal sticking up like that. So this battery goes on the left, and the negative terminal's the positive terminal stick up this time. There we go, that looks lovely. That means this piece is going to go there. There we go. Ho ho, sort of taking shape. Hopefully these bits will just slide straight through. Yeah. 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 Of course that has to be lifted now because yeah, that's good, that's exactly what I... And then this piece should hopefully slide through here without any problems. Look at that. Yeah. Yeah, and that lifts that up just a millimetre, which is what we want. And that just goes through, yeah. So, bloody great. Now the BMS I've got for this one is this one here. What a beautiful BMS. Now what I've done is I've modified this BMS, which you can do very easily actually, is that normally the battery connector sticks out this way and the positive, well, the negative feed to the system sticks out this way as well. But when you're building them in a battery box, that's a bit of a pain in the arse really, because of course, you know, you don't really want to have your terminal over here. You really want to have it this way in the direction where you're going to mount it. So you can actually, on these BMSs, you can take off this little cover here, and you can actually just take out these screws, these 4 nuts and bolts, and you can remount these to point in the other direction. So what I'll do is I'll just, well, I better take out the temperature sensor actually. Better unplug this. Oh, I can't. Can I unplug it? No, I better not. It's a fit once kind of connector. Right, so the battery management system goes in there. Oh, that's a lovely fit, isn't it? and then this terminal is going to go here. It's always surprised me that batteries, when you buy batteries, they always have 6mm posts. Yet everything, when you buy the connectors, when you buy the inverters, the MPPTs and the BMSs, they all have 8mm connectors, and so you have to put an 8mm onto a 6mm, and somehow that says to me that that's wrong. Everything should be 8mm. But I guess what happened is when they first started to make these batteries, they were very small and 6mm was fine, and then over the years they've become sort of much higher in capacity. Everything's become 8mm, yet they still kept 6mm on the batteries, which is such a weird sort of thing. So if I just measure this, that means the BMS is 7cm in. So what I want to do is I want to measure the BMS to be 3.5cm in, so that it's nicely in the middle for the maximum heat dissipation. And 3.5cm would be, oops, not there. There we go. Wow, 3.5cm. Ho ho. Right, here we go. Now what I want to do is to find the point where the BMS sits on here nicely, so that that wire has got a nice arc in it. Probably about there, I'd say, actually. Right, so let's get this mounted then. So now I've got to mark the... Oh, I've lost all my holes. Oh, shit. That's better. Take two. There we go. So the negative terminal, obviously the battery terminal, because they're both negative, it's not called a negative and positive because that's just confusing. So this one goes there. So now this one, got to find a nice spot for this. So we've got a connector that goes here. In fact, I ought to put that connector in, shouldn't I? This is the connector that goes to all the batteries. So every single battery has its own connector from the BMS. It's only a tiny weeny wire that goes to each battery, because there's only like 0.5 amp of current goes in here. So what happens is that when the battery's being charged, this is monitoring the voltage of every single battery, and it's very important that every single battery is exactly the same voltage And what this does is that it makes sure that when you're charging the battery from one end to the other end, it then adds a little, you know, half an amp here, half an amp here, whatever, just to like kind of balance the batteries. Where it notices the voltage is a little bit high here, you know, maybe it's like a tiny bit less here and things, and they do an amazing job. I mean, when you actually look at the batteries after they've been charged with using one of these, I mean, they are within 1 or 2 hundredths of a volt of one another. I mean, they really are very clever. So I'll pop this one in here. Is this a... oh, this one's got a little clip on it, so it's not a fit once kind of plug, but I won't put it all the way in just in case it... right, so that's going to go there. So now I really need somewhere to put the positive terminal. I'd really like to put it here actually, but that's not an option. So all I've got to do is make sure that the stud just misses this. I don't have a lot of choice really, it can only go in one spot. If it's got to miss that with all of them on it and another couple of wires here, then it has to go here. Right. So the next bit I've got to do is these top and bottom and the end panel. I know now that it will all fit together nicely, so I've got to fill all of these with a bit of filler and sand all them down. Right, so I've just made a little concoction here. This is roughly how big it's going to be. I'll just measure that. So that's about 20 mil, and of course there's 2 of these. They're 3 mil thick, so that means I've got 23 millimeters sticking up, plus I'm going to need a little bit of thread, say 6 mil sticking up. So I'm looking for a countersink bolt that's going to be 24 plus 23 plus 6, that's 13, 53 mil long. So the idea is that I've got 2 countersunk bolts that's screwed into the wood from the bottom, and they stick up to provide the connections, the 2 electrical connections. But I need 55 or 60 bolts, and all I've got is 35. So that means a whole trip into town to go and spend 50 cents. 10 euros of the fuel to go and buy 50p's worth of stuff. Okay, so I've got some countersink bolts. So the BMS is going to go here, and the negative terminal is going to go here. But I'm also going to need a positive output from the battery. So the positive terminal's down the bottom here, of course. That's wire's going to come up to here, and I want to be able to get to them So I don't really want to put them in a line because this that one could come around here. I suppose I could put them in a line side by side, couldn't I? Because then this one comes round here, this one comes up here, and then the two wires could come in here and here. Yeah, why don't I do that? So this is 8.6, so that's going to go there, that's going to go there, that's 42, that would work, wouldn't it? That's 42 and that's 50. Now I could just about get a spanner in to, I'm pretty sure that would be a 13mm spanner. Yeah, look at that, that's nice. I could go, and that sort of sticks out there, and also it's not possible to touch the other terminal. Well, it would be, but I mean. Right, so what I've done is I've drilled a 6.3mm hole, and I've countersunked it. So what I'm going to do now is just tap an M8 thread in the wood itself. That will work nicely. Nicely, it's nice and flush, that's not going anywhere. Yeah, that's lovely, that is. So I'll just make sure that's going to work. So that sits there, aligns with those screw holes. That comes round there, that goes on there. Oh, look at that. Bloody fabulous. Right, so I'm pleased with that. That looks lovely. So the next job is to paint it. I think it's all finished now, isn't it? Yeah, it's all finished. I wonder if this is water based or spirit based. Oh, what a horrible smell. I think it's tomcat piss based. Ugh. Right, so I need a little mixing pot. This is why I keep lots of empty milk bottles in my milk jugs in my workshop. Ta-da! There we go. Drop of white spirit. Oh, that's gone lovely. Yep, so it's white spirit based, that's for sure. Okay, this is all primed up lovely actually. So I use this very coarse 80 grit to actually get the wood, edges of the wood flush with one another, but of course this is way too coarse for sanding down the filler, so I use 150 right, now I can, oh, hang on, what's going on here? Oh, I don't believe it. I haven't got any paint on that side. How the bloody hell has it become a part of the saw bench? For God's sake. In putting the wood out on the wall, I've gone and found my impact driver. I spent bloody ages looking for this the other day. I just gave up. Right, so quick tidy up and cup of tea time, and that's it for today. I love the way putting that tiny bit of filler on it, you can't actually see any of the joins or the edges, or you can't even make out where the end grain is, can you?
No.
It just looks like a perfect box. I think as well it looks better in white, whereas it would look a bit more professional if it was in like a light grey or something, but I think it looks nice in white, don't you? Match just...
Well, it matches the wall and the cupboard and...
Yeah, the trunking and...
Yeah.
So have you finished now?
I'd like to give that side a coat if I could.
All right, well, shall we attempt to turn it round?
Yeah, if you can get your hands right underneath.
Yeah, of course.
That'll do. That'll do.
That looks really lovely. You can't see it, it just looks like it's just a commercially made box, doesn't it? And it's been sprayed. I mean, you can't see any brush marks or anything. It's definitely the way to do it. It hasn't really taken very long as well. I mean, it's taken me about 2 days to build the box, I guess. But if I'd have built another one, I could probably make one in a day.
Well, the measuring is the thing, isn't it? You have to get the measurements absolutely bang on. Otherwise it's not going to...
Yeah, well, I had all the measurements bang on because I had it all on the computer. But as it transpired that it wasn't quite right, because I thought I had 2 pieces of... I bought a lovely sheet of marine ply, and I went down the timber merchants and asked for 12mm, and they didn't have any. So they sold me 15mm, and it had printed on it 15mm, and I just didn't check it, and I was using it, and then when I assembled it and glued it all together and then measured it, it was 24mm with 2 bits glued together and not...
Do you want to lift the other end?
Yeah.
And we'll put it back outside.
So in fact it was 12mm, just exactly what I wanted. So this is going to go... Whoops.
Yeah, you can't grab any part of it, obviously.
Yeah, right, okay, I've just realised that. There isn't any... Whoa, whoa, shit.
Just stuff your finger in the corner, actually, very lightly.
Yeah, that's what I've done. Oh, I see, over there, yeah? Are you putting it or up here? Oh, I see, where it can like sit on that piece. Yeah? Okay, so the next job is to mount the BMS. Stick all the batteries in, bolt it all up. Blimey. Screws that hold the BMS in are absolutely minute. So next I need some nice 8mm washers. Two 8mm nuts to make the standoffs. Right, so I've discovered a slight cock up in that you'll find that when you put these shafts in, that you'll need to rotate them a tiny weeny bit, just a couple of millimetres. And it becomes so much easier if it has a tiny weeny little slot in the end, so you can put a screwdriver in it. Okay, it's all assembled, all the nuts and bolts and shafts are in. So a couple of questions you might ask is, how on earth did I get the nut on that shaft all the way inside it? Well, I cheated. What I did was I got a great big long screwdriver and I put a tiny drop of hot melt glue on the end of it, like so, just a little drop, and then I glued the nut on it, like so, and as you can see the nut's now glued on the end of the screwdriver, and all I did was I could poke this in through the little gap, look through the hole until the nut was exactly lined up with the hole that went through it. Then of course I could just poke the threaded shaft through and it would go straight through the nut and I could screw it in. Right, the next question you're probably asking is, okay, so I've got the threaded shaft and it goes through the nut, fair enough, yeah, on the inside. How on earth do I screw this shaft all the way into the battery box, you know, without it taking all day? Well, once again, you can cheat a little bit. Now I bought years ago, and I must admit, it's absolutely invaluable. Now I use this, this is a standard hex drive to 1/2-inch socket adapter. And I got this on AliExpress years ago. It was peanuts, and I use it all the time. It's just one of those tools that's just fantastic to have in your toolbox. So what I do is I put 2 nuts on the end of the shaft, like so. Tighten them up against one another, like so. Put that in the drilling machine, put that there, and then all I need to do is to pop the socket on there and I can now do it up at high speed. Now with all YouTube videos, I find when I'm looking at these videos about how people built things and what they've done and things like that, for me it's more useful for people to be honest and tell them what they've done wrong and how they could have done it better, rather than the sanctimonious "aren't I brilliant?" videos that you see all over YouTube. So I'm going to discuss now all the things that I think are wrong with this, so that when and if you build one, you can build a better one. So the things that's right is the fact that this clamping system that's working in left, right, up and down is bloody fantastic. I mean, all these batteries are clamped in all dimensions. Great. I haven't seen any battery boxes ever that works this well. The second big advantage or feature of this is that, and this wasn't part of the design criteria, it's just that it's happened, is that I've got all my batteries, and I'm going to put quite a few more banks of these in place, outside. Although, and they're going to be in this like meter cupboard here, and there's going to be some doors and things and bits and pieces. But I'm a bit worried about security, because I mean there's like £1,000 worth of batteries here, and I'm going to have £2,000 worth of batteries here, another £2,000 here, and £1,000 worth here. I mean, it's an awful lot of batteries I'm going to have outside. But the nice thing is that this is kind of unnickable. I mean, the time it's taken me to put these batteries in this unit, it would take some burglar who wants to steal my batteries, it would take him bloody hours to steal my batteries. And it's not like you could just unbolt it off the wall, because it's so bloody heavy that you can't just wheel it away. So security is actually a great second feature. Now, what are the things that I've cocked up? Well, let's go through them one by one. First off, that if I was doing it again, I wouldn't use 10mm shafts, I would use 8mm for sure, even though 8mm for me is slightly more expensive, but I would have used 8mm because 10mm is a bit unwieldy. This gap here on the left, where the nut is here on the end, and then the idea is this nut's on the end here, and then the whole thing is clamped that way by doing up the nut here. That works great, but I didn't leave enough gap here to sensibly work in, and it needs to be at least another centimetre bigger. What else would I do? Well, I'm not convinced about this gap here. You see, this is a bit fiddly. I'd have preferred another centimetre gap here, this top gap. I would have liked the BMS, where this wire is here, there's a 2 centimetre clearance from here to there. That's wrong, that should have been 0. So the edge of this connector should have actually been here. So I'd bring the BMS about 1.5 to 2 centimetres forward. And then these two studs here, these connecting studs, that would have meant they would have been 2 centimetres forward as well, which would have been much more sensible. Now the shaft, I've got a 10mm shaft running through an 11mm hole. That's made it quite difficult to assemble. It didn't just slide together dead easy. So I would have preferred to have used a 10mm shaft in a 12mm slot, or an 8mm shaft in a 10mm slot. Probably an 8mm shaft in a 10mm slot, and that would have given me a lot more play, and I could have slid things together much more easily. The shafts need a slot cut in the end, so you can put a screwdriver in, and then you can hold the shaft while you then do this nut up and squash all the batteries. On this plate here, there's a washer and there's a nut. Now the washer is a real bastard to get that washer on the shaft. In fact, it's not a bastard, it's actually impossible. So what I had to do, I had to take it apart, and I actually glued the washer in place on the end of this piece of wood on the end of this panel here. That meant that when I slid these the shafts in from the end, that I didn't have to faff around trying to locate the washer. The washer was already in the right place, and it was almost acting like a guide for the thread to take the thread through. Now, one thing I didn't give a lot of thought to, and I've only just realised it because my next job is to put the trunking on, and when I put the sub-trunking in place like here, it's only a few millimetres away from these nuts here, which means that if I take the cover off the trunking, it's just not quite missing the nuts. So I've started clinking up all the wires, and I've just discovered another big cock up I made, which hopefully you won't make, in that all these BMSs, they've got a battery temperature sensor. Now the temperature sensor is just a tiny weeny black blob connected by these two tiny wires. I mean, it's only literally probably about 3 millimeters in diameter. I've squashed the batteries together in all dimensions so well that it's impossible to insert this. There's no option for it. I've got to take the whole lot apart, well, slacken it all off, slide 2 of the batteries out. And what I should have done is I should have made a tiny weeny slot in the top so that slid all the batteries in. Before I clamped it all up solid, I could have just slid this temperature sensor in this little slot so it was just in contact with the batteries. This particular battery box I've made, this 24-volt battery box, is to drive my off-grid 24-volt lighting system that illuminates all my house and garden and things, and it just runs all night. And these off-grid lighting systems are very important if you've got a house surrounded by CCTV cameras and things, because you need to have permanent background illumination. Now I'm going to build a 48-volt box is my next project after I've got all of this bit working, and my 48-volt box is going to be an off-grid, on-grid, hybrid system that's designed to integrate in with a net metering system, which are very popular in the EU. And if there's anything you'd like me to put on video about MPPTs, grid tie inverters, on-grid, off-grid, hybrid systems, emergency charging systems, or anything like that, then let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can put together.